April 10, 1912, Southampton, England. The RMS Titanic, the largest ship ever built, embarked on its maiden voyage to New York City. Dubbed Unsinkable by its builders and the press, it was a marvel of engineering, a floating palace designed to redefine luxury travel. On board were some of the wealthiest people in the world, alongside thousands of immigrants seeking new lives in America. The atmosphere was one of unbridled optimism and confidence. This was not just a ship, it was a symbol of human ingenuity, a testament to man's ability to conquer the seas. The very idea of its sinking was dismissed as impossible. Its 16 watertight compartments, capable of sealing off flooded sections, fueled this powerful myth. But the Unsinkable label was more than just a marketing slogan. It was a psychological construct. It fostered a dangerous sense of invincibility, not just among the passengers, but crucially, among the crew and management. This overconfidence bias would prove to be a fatal flaw. The ship carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for just over half of the 2,200 people on board, far fewer than its full capacity. This was technically legal under the outdated regulations of the time, but it was a clear compromise on safety, justified by the belief that the ship would never truly sink. As the Titanic steamed across the Atlantic, the wireless operators received multiple warnings of icebergs. These messages, however, were often dismissed, delayed, or never reached the bridge. The ship maintained a high speed, driven by a desire to make good time and perhaps even break a speed record. This was the psychology of hubris in action. A grand vessel, a confident crew, and a world convinced of its invincibility, sailing headlong into a silent, unseen danger. The stage was set for a tragedy born not just of ice and steel, but of the human mind. Ever heard the story of the unsinkable Titanic? We all have. But what if I told you the real reason it sank wasn't just an iceberg? What if the true culprit was something lurking deep within the human mind? The story of the Titanic is more than just a historical event. It's a chilling case study in how our own psychology can lead us down a path to disaster. The idea that the Titanic was unsinkable wasn't just a clever marketing slogan. It was a deeply held belief, a powerful psychological conviction that infected everyone from the shipbuilders to the crew. This created a dangerous mix of biases that blinded them to the very real dangers of the North Atlantic. The biggest psychological trap was overconfidence, plain and simple. The Titanic was a marvel of its time, the peak of engineering and luxury. This incredible achievement bred a sense of invincibility, a form of hubris. The people in charge truly believed they had conquered the ocean. Even the celebrated Captain Edward Smith, a man with decades of experience, seemed to fall under the spell of the unsinkable story. This collective overconfidence led to a fatal attitude. They stopped expecting the unexpected. When you think you're invincible, you start cutting corners. This is a phenomenon called the normalization of deviance. Safety rules that once seemed essential start to feel like optional extras. The most shocking example of this was the number of lifeboats. The Titanic was legally required to carry only enough for a fraction of its passengers and crew. But instead of exceeding this bare minimum for a ship of its unprecedented size, they stuck to it. Why? Because in their minds, a full-scale evacuation was an impossible scenario. The lifeboats were seen more for rescuing passengers from another, less fortunate ship. The very idea that the Titanic itself would need them was unthinkable. This wasn't just a poor decision. It was a symptom of a dangerously complacent mindset. As the Titanic sailed into the icy waters of the Atlantic, the warnings started coming in. Not one, not two, but at least 6 distinct messages about massive ice fields directly in their path were received. But what happened to these crucial warnings? This is where confirmation bias kicks in. Confirmation bias is our tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs. The crew believed the ship was safe, so they unconsciously downplayed, misinterpreted, or outright ignored the warnings that contradicted this belief. Some messages were dismissed as non-urgent. One crucial warning from the ship, California, never even made it to Captain Smith because the radio operator was overwhelmed with sending passenger telegrams. Each ignored warning was a missed opportunity, a chance to change course that was lost to a wall of psychological bias. Despite the warnings they did receive, and the growing darkness, the Titanic continued to race through the night at a dangerous speed of around 22 knots. This is a classic example of what's called escalation of commitment. They were behind schedule, and there was immense public pressure and expectation to make a record-breaking crossing. Instead of slowing down in the face of known risks, the ice warnings, the pressure to succeed pushed them to double down on their risky course of action. They were committed to speed, and every decision was made to serve that goal, even when caution screamed for them to slow down. So, when you picture the Titanic's final moments, don't just see a ship and an iceberg, see the invisible forces at play. The overconfidence that said we can't sink, the normalization of deviance that left them without enough lifeboats, the confirmation bias that deafened them to warnings, and the escalation of commitment that kept them speeding towards their doom. The Titanic disaster wasn't just an accident. It was the inevitable result of a perfect psychological storm. Lookout Frederick Fleet spotted an iceberg directly ahead. "Iceberg right ahead," he shouted, ringing the bell 3 times. First Officer William Murdoch ordered hard-ass starboard and full astern, but it was too late. The Titanic, traveling at nearly full speed, could not turn quickly enough. It scraped along the starboard side of the iceberg, creating a series of gashes below the waterline. For most passengers, the impact was barely noticeable, a slight shudder, a faint grinding sound. Many dismissed it as a minor incident, perhaps the ship brushing against another vessel or dropping an anchor. This initial reaction was a powerful manifestation of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance, the human mind struggles to hold conflicting beliefs simultaneously. Passengers and crew had been told and believed that the Titanic was unsinkable. The idea that this magnificent vessel could be fatally damaged by an iceberg was profoundly unsettling and contradictory to their established belief system. To resolve this dissonance, they initially rationalized the event as minor. "It's nothing serious. We've just hit a small piece of ice. The ship is too big to sink." This psychological defense mechanism led to precious time being lost. Underestimation of damage and authority gradient below deck. The reality was grim. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, quickly assessed the damage. 5 of the watertight compartments were breached. The ship could only stay afloat, with 4 compartments flooded. He knew, almost immediately, that the Titanic was doomed. Yet this dire assessment was slow to propagate and be fully accepted by those in command. Captain Smith, despite Andrews' expertise, initially struggled to grasp the full implications. The authority gradient played a role here, not in challenging a superior, but in the difficulty of accepting such a catastrophic truth from an expert, especially when it contradicted the deeply ingrained unsinkable narrative. Delayed and confused response. The initial response was characterized by confusion and a lack of urgency. Lifeboats were ordered to be uncovered, but many passengers, still in denial, refused to board them, preferring the warmth and perceived safety of the ship. Some lifeboats were launched half-empty, a tragic consequence of the belief that they wouldn't be needed and the lack of proper drills. The wireless operators, who had earlier dismissed ice warnings, now frantically sent out distress calls, but even these were initially met with skepticism by some distant ships. The psychological struggle to accept the unthinkable was a critical factor in the unfolding disaster. The unsinkable myth, once a source of comfort and pride, became a psychological barrier to effective action. The cognitive dissonance prevented a swift, unified, and urgent response, costing lives in the crucial early hours. The ship was not just battling the icy waters, it was battling the human mind's resistance to a terrifying new reality. We all know the image of the Titanic's final moments, the bow plunging beneath the icy waves while the stern rises dramatically into the night sky. But have you ever stopped to think about what was really happening on that deck? What was going through the minds of the 2,200 souls on board as their world literally turned upside down? This isn't just a story of a shipwreck. It's a chilling psychological study of human behavior under the most extreme pressure imaginable. Let's start with the moment the iceberg struck. For many, it was just a slight shudder, nothing to worry about. But as the ship began to list, a stark contrast emerged. In the opulent lounges of first class, there was a sense of disbelief, a refusal to accept that the unsinkable ship was in peril. Officers tried to maintain order, urging passengers to put on their lifebelts and proceed to the boat deck calmly. There was an eerie, almost surreal atmosphere, but down in the crowded maze-like corridors of third class, the reality was far more terrifying. Water was already seeping in, and with confusing instructions and locked gates designed to keep the classes separate, panic began to take hold. Imagine the sheer terror of being trapped below deck, hearing the screams and the groaning of the ship, with no clear path to safety. Amidst this growing chaos, one of the most enduring legends of the Titanic was born. The ship's band, Wallace Hartley and his musicians famously assembled on deck and began to play. They didn't play frantic, panicked tunes. They played calm, beautiful hymns and popular ragtime melodies. Why, it wasn't just to soothe their own fears. It was a conscious act of psychological control, an attempt to project a sense of normalcy and order in the face of absolute catastrophe. Their music became a beacon of calm in a sea of terror, a final, defiant act of humanity that has resonated through history. Their bravery helped prevent an all-out riot, giving the crew precious time to launch the few lifeboats they had. The launch of those lifeboats revealed the brutal social hierarchy of the time. The unwritten rule was women and children first, but the grim reality was women and children of the first and second class first. Survival rates tell a chilling story. Over 97% of women in first class were saved, compared to less than half in third class. Men in first class had a better chance of survival than children in third class. Barriers, both physical and social, kept many steerage passengers from even reaching the boat deck until it was far too late. They were seen as less important, their lives deemed more expendable in the scramble for survival. It's a dark testament to how class and wealth dictated who lived and who died. As the lifeboats rowed away, those left behind faced a new kind of horror. They were adrift in the middle of the North Atlantic, a vast, dark expanse of freezing water. The screams of over 1,000 people in the water slowly faded into an agonizing silence. For the survivors in the boats, many of whom had left husbands, fathers, and sons on the sinking ship, This was a moment of profound trauma. They were safe, but they were helpless witnesses to an unimaginable tragedy. The psychological scars of that night, the sounds, the cold, the guilt of survival would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Many survivors rarely spoke of their experience, the memory too painful to revisit. Then came the final apocalyptic moment. The strain on the Titanic's structure became too much. With a sound described as a deafening roar of tearing metal, the ship broke in two. The lights flickered one last time and went out, plunging the scene into total darkness. Imagine the psychological impact of seeing this modern marvel, this symbol of human achievement, literally torn apart before your eyes. It wasn't just a ship sinking, it was the world ending. The stern, now free, bobbed vertically for a moment before beginning its final, terrifying plunge to the ocean floor, taking the last of its victims with it. The sinking of the Titanic wasn't just a physical event, it was a psychological one that shattered the era's faith in technology and progress, leaving behind a legacy of heroism, horror, and haunting questions about how we behave when faced with our own mortality. Thanks for watching. If you found this exploration into the human side of the Titanic disaster interesting, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most compelling stories. April 15, 1912, 2:20 a.m. The RMS Titanic slipped beneath the waves, 1,500 lives lost. The sinking remains one of history's most enduring tragedies, a stark reminder that even the grandest human achievements are vulnerable to the unseen forces of nature and the unseen flaws of human psychology. The lessons are stark, the peril of hubris and overconfidence. The power of cognitive dissonance. The mind's resistance to uncomfortable truths can delay crucial actions in a crisis. The impact of social hierarchy. The disaster brutally exposed how ingrained social biases can influence survival. The Titanic's legacy is a chilling testament to the fact that even the most advanced technology cannot overcome the fundamental flaws of human psychology. It calls us to a constant vigilance, a profound humility, and an unwavering commitment to valuing every human life equally.